So Shiv, I was reading like this book called Attached, and I think like today we'll just go over like what the concept of this book is. So it touches on like the idea of like attachment theory, attachment styles, and it was written by a psychiatrist who goes by the name Amir Levine, and a psychologist called Rachel Heller. And they basically imply that many of our relationships issues stems from the differences in how we perceive and how we express intimacy. And by understanding it and taking action, you can actually achieve greater harmony in relationships. So I'm just going to start off. Have you ever heard or do you even know what attachment styles are?
Look, I've heard of attachment styles going into like where there's no demons and you get attached with a demon.
What do you mean?
They possess you, you know what I mean? There's demons, like, where there's no portal of hell and they go in and they literally just some demon just like,
I
yeah,
don't know
hey.
which side of the internet you're on, but that's some wild.
Hey, I'm on that phase right now where I'm just like watching a lot of Sam and Colby videos and a lot of guys that go and explore like known haunted areas. But I don't want to deviate. That's a completely separate conversation. But no, thank you for distinguishing that because attachment styles. Yeah, I mean, is it like? I think if I was to say it, I think it's more like there's an element of intimacy and how it's not just a relationship with the partner. It's actually a relationship with your job, with your friends, with your family, with other aspects as well. So I think a lot of people think of attachment styles as just between, in a relationship between two individuals. But I actually think of it as beyond that because a lot of it, that your attachment style will actually dictate how you might react in the work environment or with your friends. Like, are you someone that shuts down and, you're I mean, I could be completely wrong here, but is it, are you someone that's very sort of not an erratic friend, but someone that's not as caring or someone that's not as not nurturing or someone that's very, I think, look, I'm just going to say it. So it's either an erratic friend or someone that's very calm. But again, erratic does not mean being absolute unhinged and being things. It's just because of the different experiences they had as a child growing up, that their view on the world that's how it is dictated. So I think that's what my understanding of attachment styles is.
Yeah, I think like I think you're right on the path of like it being coming from childhood. I think that has a big effect as well, and we'll talk more about it later on. But yeah, I think it's good that you said it in a way that attachment styles isn't just about relationships, like in terms of like your partner. It also expands out to other parts of your life as well. And that's completely right because the way they explain it, like Levine and Heller in the book, is that everyone has an attachment system. So it's not just with your partner, it's a system basically of response. And it's basically like a mechanism in your brain which compels to seek, monitor, or maintain intimacy within a partner or with other people as well. And there's actually like 3 different attachment styles. So the first one is like you already mentioned, which was secure attachment. And it's where it's like you were also saying like nurturing, you're more responsive and you're comfortable with intimacy. And now the other 2 are more, I would say, like negative forms of attachment styles. But I think all of us, most people have it inbuilt, I think. The second one is basically anxious. So you're preoccupied with making the relationship solid and you're constantly seeking reassurance from the partner. So you want to be as close as possible and you fear distance. That's what it is.
No.
So
No, it's a.
yeah.
So those are the 2. You've got the nurturing, that's very. I don't want to say positive because I just don't want it to be seen as a positive and a negative thing. It's sort of, they both have different consequences, which can be either positive or negative, and people can work on that. But if you were to just fundamentally describe it, yeah, it's like one is a lot healthier and the other one requires more work, and it's based on a lot of I think based on assumptions and unrealistic expectations, or thinking too much of basing it more on opinions and what your opinion is rather than what is actually happening in front of you, the facts.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think it's a lot. There's a lot more to it as well with anxious,
Right.
Because it comes from like childhood and stuff, which we'll talk more about. But yeah, pretty much. And the third one is like avoidant. In the avoidant one is like you distance yourself more, and because you see it like the idea of intimacy threatening your independence. So that's like avoidant attachment. And so the reason why I think, identifying attachment matters is because it's going to, the more aware you are, the better you can understand how to mitigate those things and build a more of a emotionally more satisfying romantic relationship. And obviously having a good relationship will improve your quality of life. There's like a study it's actually one of the longest studies by Harvard. It's like an 85-year-old study. So it's been passed from like professor to professor basically.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a generational thing. It's still probably going, I think. And what they found is like the number one thing that makes us happy in life is actually having healthy social relationships.
See, I love how you said healthy social relationships, not a relationship. Because a lot of people think of it as, oh, if I don't have a partner or a wife or a husband or whatever it is, then that's what it means. No, it's social relationships with other people around you, whether that's your friends, your family, your partner, your kids, your work colleagues. I mean, I think some people draw the boundary between seeing their work colleagues as friends or not, and that's perfectly fine. But it's like, do you have a healthy social? Like, are you able to go on a coffee with your work colleagues? You don't have to overshare your life, but are you able to have are you able to be comfortable around them at that point in time?
Yeah, definitely. I think and yeah, it's obviously very important that it's healthy, not in very toxic and all that, because that can really, I think, affect a lot of obviously your mind and time, but it's just it puts you in a very low energy state as well, because you always be surrounded with that type of.
We're not, the sad thing is, I think, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, I'm sorry, but it's, a lot of people are getting lonelier as as time goes on. Where if you look at it, introduction of social media and phones, and the world is very digital based now. So, these online relationships that you're building with people, I wouldn't consider that as a very social relationship, because that human connectivity is so important, right? The way we've evolved is by social relationships, right? If you look at tribalism and how we've evolved from tribes and like collective groups to ideologies to shared beliefs, and now where we are, it's been based on human interactions. Human interaction is like one of the most important aspects. And I think COVID, at the time when there was lockdowns, a lot of people were forced to stay in and isolate, and that removed a lot of, I think people say, oh, I don't actually need human interaction. I mean, so let's say work from home, right? Like work from home has become a big thing. The people that just want to work from home, that's fine, but are you actually understanding who you're interacting with around you on a day-to-day basis? Because interacting with, and it's not even about going out of your way to speak to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, but it's like, are you comfortable to be around other people? That's the biggest thing. Because a lot of people say, oh, I have social anxiety when I'm around too many people. Like, is it really? Or is it you've conditioned yourself to not really enjoy human interaction, which is fine, but a lot of our existence is based on human interaction. So you can't survive. It's sort of a survival mechanism, right? You can't live your life not having any interaction with anyone. Isn't it Maslow's
Hierarchy of
needs? Is social relations, I think.
Yeah, I think it is actually in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very important. Like It's like so ancestral as well because like if you were a lone survivor, if you didn't fit into the tribe, your chance of surviving was extremely low.
Mm.
Like you would not be able to survive by yourself for very long. So that innate sense of belonging is within us from like it's like almost genetic. Like it's sort of well, I don't really have the science to back it up, but I presume it is somewhat like genetically inbuilt that we all want a sense of belonging at the end of the day. So yeah, it's very important to be able to interact. And I think it's not just like online interaction because genuine relationships are built upon like physical, face to face, real life interactions. And obviously, it gets more built up during the hard times, which are the more honest type of relationships that get built
Mm.
during the tough times who's around.
And I will say, like, we live in a time right now that the amount of people that you meet is so abundant, but also the different types of people you meet, like different religions, different ethnicities, different cultures, different perspectives. It's ironic because it's probably the best time to learn from other people and their perspective, but we're actually not exhibiting that. Everything is just so digital based, very to myself, avoiding that human interaction when the time for human interaction is probably the most beneficial. So, for example, if you look at the 1930s or etc., migration wasn't as big. You didn't have, like, the biggest thing is, let's think about it. Our grandparents probably never thought of eating Chinese food or Thai food or even, any sort of American, British, Australian food, whatever cuisine it is, ever. We never thought of it being shared. We were just like, oh. Now imagine going back and saying to them, hey, in 100 years or in 50 years, we'd be able to try what Chinese food is like, what Thai food is like, what Japanese food is like, right? And the sharing of the idea, it's come from a very special place, but we just take it for granted so much. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, like the idea of like sharing, because before it was just like more like within their culture and within where they live. Then would you say then in that sense, I guess social media has allowed that as well, in the sense of
Definitely.
like being able to build communities and expand beyond just where you are, because
Definitely.
before we didn't have that. Would have to be, and because status was a big thing back then as well. It's just like more in your area. Like if you wanted to date someone, it'd be more of like 100 years ago. It'd just be like more of who's around you. Whereas now it's like you can get a relationship over like someone from the other side of the world.
Yeah, there's been
Through
pros and cons to social media. Like, again, like, I think demonizing social media is not the right way to go about it. I think it's just looking at the effects it's had, right? And I think if we simply just look at social relationships, has social media allowed for a better flow state of information and, more communities to evolve and people to be more aligned and those communities be a part of something? 100%. That's been the great part of it. But if we look at social relationships and human interactions, that's actually taken that element away. I mean, if people are so afraid to now meet up in person and human interact, that's concerning because that's not how we're conditioned, right? Like we're really fighting what we're genetically predisposed to do, which is build relationships. I mean, when you have a meaningful relationship with people, you feel good about yourself. Like it's not. You can sense it. You can sense that there's a form of belonging. There's a sense of we connect. There's a shared idea. There's something nice about sitting as a group, talking about something, debating about something, sharing ideas. And that's come from that for me personally. It's come from human interactions. It hasn't come from anything else. Maybe watching educational content on YouTube and podcasts and listening to Tim Dillon rant, but but other than that, no, like it's a lot of it. I mean, it's been balanced, but that human interaction component has been so important.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Like a balance and how you use it is very important. Like with social media, especially, you should be using it not for just like having things online. Also, like meeting up in person as well. Especially, I think that balance is very important. And now I just want to come back to like the topic of like attachment styles of like
Yeah, sure.
why it's important. And I think basically based off what they've said is like if you want to be like your best self, like in your romantic relationship or relationships in general, there's like emotional needs that need to be fulfilled. And I think I do want to talk more about this actually, like the idea of integrating your emotions. So becoming a more integrated person. Because I think these days with emotions, people like to go with there's two extremes. One is being, where you post it all online. You just tell everyone how you feel or whatever it is, and you operate on just that energy. And the second one is like being a monk, where you just ignore everything. And I think both of those are not good examples of like integrating emotions properly. And would you agree? Like, and especially with men, I think like with emotions, it's like a very feminine type of thing. Whereas I think, and Chris Williamson also emphasized this as well, where it's like we should be able to learn how to understand it, be aware about it, and how we can integrate it within ourselves. Because if you don't, well, what will end up happening is that it will actually lead you to becoming controlled by your emotions. It'll just lead to sabotaging your relationships with other people, ultimately. Like, what do you think about like integrating emotions? And
What does it exactly mean by integrating emotions? Is it like integrating into your actions or understanding who you are?
so I think the best way to put it is just like being able to become aware of it, understanding where it's coming from.
Yep.
And then also part of it is like how you can be able to express it, but in a healthy way. And being yeah, and I think that ultimately is like the integration part. So it's like you being able to apply it in a way that is healthy and productive to, and that is also building authenticity rather than trying to show like this type of
Yeah.
persona or character to the world.
So
It's perfect.
just the bit part of the monk mode, right? Why do monks go into monk mode? No one can actually really. I mean, I personally can't answer that question, right? But a lot of these guys that say I want to go into monk mode and do this, none of that detox. It's like, is it really? Like, do you understand why monks actually go into monk mode? It's because they're actually fulfilled with what they have at that point. They're not trying to detox from the world. They're not trying to, abstain from sex or abstain from and go through the path of semen retention and detox their mind. They're actually very content with where they are. And for them, the attachment to the world means nothing at that point. And so they take on that part of a monk, right? So a lot of people see monk mode as, oh yeah, I'm just going to come back a lot better. You fundamentally have not changed who you are. You've just abstained from specific behavior for a certain period of time, but you are not content with who you are at that point. If you're not content with yourself, you can't go on to free yourself of all the attachments, because deep down, you are still longing for those attachments. You're still longing for that, the validation, the ego. If you're an influencer like that goes on monk mode, you still want people, like, why document it? Why document monk mode? If you're content with who you are and what you are, why document it? Because fundamentally, you haven't integrated how you actually feel about integrating emotions into that. You are lost in that cause, right? So abstaining from behavior that leads to destructive paths is great if you understand why you're doing it. But it's also being content with where you are right now. But to touch on your point about integrated emotions, like, you're right. I think people aren't genuine with how they feel or what they actually think. And you will get so much more from actually expressing how you feel in a healthy way than just being untruthful to yourself. Because over time, as you're being untruthful to yourself, I think, and never experienced this, but you build a very different persona of yourself and you become a very different person. You've become someone that even you don't know who you are. and it's driven by what it's driven by opinions. It's not driven by facts. If we go and look at that, it's all assumptions. I know you want to say something. I could see your lips.
No, I was gonna say like, yeah, then that's the scary part about it.
Yeah.
It's like you end up, because you're not being truthful to yourself. You end up displaying this persona to other people, and it's, as you said, it's controlled by what? Opinions by other people. It's controlled by your emotion. You don't even realize it, but those emotions are actually controlling you subconsciously. It's also your ego or it's by algorithms like numbers, achievements that define you, and that ends up leading to you actually resenting yourself because you become a part of yourself that isn't you. So, I think with like attachment theory, like it really tries to emphasize on the importance of creating an environment where you are able to express it healthy and be able to, because then once you're able to do that and you're able to integrate, identify these emotions, then you're able to then resolve a lot of conflicts, and conflicts not necessarily with other people, but within internal conflicts that you have about yourself. So Levine and Heller like mentioned that a person with like secure attachment style has like a compelling desire for intimacy with their partner, and they're also like very comfortable with emotional distance. So that's what like secure attachment is. They don't need like constant negotiation or anything. Like they are content with whatever they have with their partner, and there's like a sense of, I think what's very important is like emotional stability, and they're able to express that within the relationship that they're in, and they have very fewer tendencies or substances compared to like insecure attachments. So they tend to be actually more healthier and happier.
What do you mean by fewer substances? What's the fewest substance compared to someone that's avoidant or anxious?
Yeah, so I think what I really mean is like more of like they have less tendencies as opposed to someone who has
But what are
insecure attachments. Yeah, I was going to go over those.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, so like a person who's like more anxious has like this belief of survival. Like their survival is actually dependent on success of their partnership. It's just like their entire persona and everything is based on like their partner. It's not like they don't have their own type of personality, or they fear that basically. So they are always on guard all the time. And even like the slightest things that are perceived as threats can lead to a huge change amongst their character, because they're very hypersensitive. So in a way, because they're very anxious, they're always thinking 24/7 about like threats and problems and things that can go wrong. They become in a way possessive, like they become controlling with the other person, and that can obviously sabotage a relationship, because you're trying to control things that may not even be problems in the beginning, but because you're in that frame of anxiousness, you always think about things going wrong, and that anxiousness ends up controlling you in your relationship, and it makes you into like this type of like person who becomes more possessive, more of like somewhat like a tyrant in a way, and things like that. I'm talking about extremes.
You know, I like how you said possessiveness and controlling, because my theory is that people that are possessive and controlling don't have control of themselves. So a tyrant will not have control of their emotions and who they are and the direction they're leading towards. Because if you're someone that has direction and you're in control of if you're in control of yourself, any threats is BS. Any threats, you're confident that I'm going to be able to handle it, right? But it's also this idea that because I can't control myself, I need to control someone else. And because I feel like I have control of that self, I have control of the whole situation. What you've fundamentally done is you've managed to just absolutely lose control of everything at that point. You know? I've never understood controlling behavior. And I'd really like to speak to someone that can actually give and support that reasoning a bit. But I've just never understood it. Like how does it come up? I think when you're younger and it's like your first relationship or whatever, you you're learning. And some things that you do might not be seen as controlling. You might not think it's controlling, but the other person might perceive it as controlling. So yeah, sometimes people get a learning from that. But then there's people that are consistently like, oh yeah, they're in controlling, manipulative relationships, like dark triad traits.
It could be that. It could be it's very complex. It could be, a lot of it could be like childhood related things as well. So yeah, we'll talk more about like those topics. But I think what I do want to end it on is that like at the end of the day with the anxious attachment, like what they just need to do is just understand what the romantic needs are. They haven't really defined what it is. And they're always putting this image of like it being perfect. Maybe it's based off like Hollywood movies or whatever it is. And they just need to be able to communicate it, especially things that they dislike. And I feel like because of the fear of what is going to be said or how it's going to be reacted, they just don't do that. And that's what leads to this anxious state all the time.